Breaking news. We're interrupting your normal broadcast with an urgent public health message.
New findings are emerging about how everyday social behaviors, especially in nightlife settings, are accelerating the transmission of bacterial pathogens through saliva.
A major culprit of this is people sharing drinks in the bar because they believe that the alcohol in their drink acts as a disinfectant. However, this is a myth. No shared drink is sterilized and oral bacteria will easily persist.
In social settings, whether a busy bar or a campus party, many activities can facilitate bacterial threat. For more on these findings, we now go to our field reporter.
Thanks. I'm here outside McDitton's, one of the most popular bars at the University of Florida, where social habits like sharing cups, taking a sip from a friend's drink, and casual kissing are a part of the atmosphere. Let's take a closer look. As you can see from that video, people are casually sharing drinks and even kissing. But in the process, they are also exchanging saliva, which carries oral bacteria. And with it, bacteria capable of causing strep throat, gingivitis, and periodontal disease. Scientists say that the oral cavity can host over 700 bacterial species, and many of them transfer easily during close contact. Tonight, we're diving into 3 particular bacteria that can be easily transmitted and the newest insights the researchers have uncovered. Back to the studio.
Very insightful. Now, let's go through the colonization pathway and explore how bacteria actually establish themselves.
Before we go through the specific infections that spread throughout the mouth, it helps to understand how bacteria actually establish themselves once they enter the body. The diagram that you see here outlines the basic steps of a pathogenic infection, essentially how a microbe moves from exposure to disease. It begins with exposure, which is the moment which bacteria first comes into contact with the body's surfaces, such as the gums or the lining of the mouth. From there, the next step is adhesion, when bacteria use specialized surface molecules, shown here as adhesins, to latch onto the receptors of our epithelial cells. Once attached, the bacteria progress to invasion, where they slip past the outer layer of cells and enter deeper tissues. After invasion comes colonization, meaning that the bacteria begin to multiply and establish a stable presence. You can see this represented by the growing number of pathogens beneath the tissue. As colonization expands, some bacteria release toxins, which are highlighted in yellow on the diagram. These toxins disrupt normal cell function and trigger inflammation. Over time, this leads to tissue damage and disease, shown here as the breakdown of the epithelial layer and the spread of both toxins and bacteria into surrounding areas. So in just a few steps, exposure, adhesion, invasion, colonization, and toxicity, an infection can take hold. This process is at the core of many oral transmitted infections we'll be discussing today, from the bacteria that contribute to gum disease, to organisms that move through saliva exchange, and even pathogens that can travel beyond the mouth to affect the rest of the body.
As part of our public health special, we conducted a literature review to understand what scientific research tells us about how saliva contributes to the spread of bacteria and disease. 2 major sources guide today's segment.
First, research by Slotz from 2011 demonstrates that saliva can contain potential pathogens in quantities sufficient to infect other individuals, meaning that normal mouth-to-mouth or saliva-sharing behaviors can transfer microbes capable of establishing infection.
We paired that with a comprehensive chapter published by Hapty and Moore in 2017, titled Infection Transmission by Saliva and the Paradoxical Protective Role of Saliva. Their analysis shows that the mouth contains hundreds of bacterial species, and saliva continuously transports these organisms across the teeth, gums, and mucosal surfaces, providing a direct route for transmission whenever saliva is exchanged.
The review also highlights that bacteria such as Streptococcus mutans and Porphyromonas gingivalis are able to attach to tooth surfaces and form biofilms, allowing persistent colonization associated with cavities and periodontal disease. The authors note that while saliva contains natural defenses like lysosome, mucins, lactoferrin, and secretory IgA, these defenses are not always enough when bacterial loads are high or immunity is compromised.
Taken together, this literature makes one message clear. Saliva exchange is a biologically efficient way to transfer bacteria between individuals, even in everyday situations like sharing drinks, utensils, or kissing. This evidence forms the scientific foundation for today's public service announcement on orally transmitted infections. Epidemiologist here. Let's talk about oral bacterial transmission, including what it is, how it works, and why nightlife behaviors can amplify exposure. Many oral bacteria are harmless. However, pathogenic species can spread through kissing, sharing drinks or food, using the same utensils, sharing lipstick, or vape mouthpieces. When these behaviors are performed, saliva is transferred, which carries a wide range of microbes, including Streptococcus pyogenes, Streptococcus mutans, and Porphyromonas gingivalis.
Thanks for that, Robert. To recap the major points here, Group A strep is a bacteria that spreads very easily, mostly through saliva and close contact.
That means everyday behaviors like sharing drinks or kissing can raise the chances of passing it from one person to another, especially in crowded settings.
Most cases will show up as regular strep throat, painful but very treatable, and we see millions of these cases each year in the United States.
But the epidemiologists point out an important detail. In rare situations, that same bacteria can become invasive and much more dangerous. The CDC reports over 1,000 deaths annually from these severe infections.
The folks most at risk are very young children, older adults, and people with underlying health issues.
And because infections spread more easily in winter and early spring, when we're indoors and in closer contact, the numbers can tend to rise during these months.
So, while most cases aren't severe, understanding how it spreads and who's vulnerable helps to keep everyone safer. The graph you just saw really highlights why awareness matters.
More news coming after this break.
Streptococcus pyogenes, also known as Group A Streptococcus GAS, is a highly transmissible bacterium commonly found in the throat and on the skin. It transfers through saliva, close contact, and respiratory droplets, which makes it easily spread in social settings where kissing, sharing drinks, or speaking closely occurs. This bacteria is the primary cause of strep throat, a painful throat infection characterized by fever, swollen tonsils, and difficulty swallowing. Once introduced to the throat, the bacteria can attach to a tissue, produce toxins, and trigger an inflammatory immune response. Crowded environments such as dorms, bars, and parties increase the opportunities for transmission. Even a brief saliva exchange can transfer GAS if one person is carrying it, symptomatically or asymptomatically. Every year in the United States, there are millions of mild strep throat cases that are easily treatable and don't cause long-term problems. However, according to the CDC, Group A strep infections cause between 1,100 and 1,600 deaths every year in the United States. People who are especially vulnerable include young children aged less than 2, whose immune systems are still developing, and older adults aged greater than 65. In addition, individuals with underlying health conditions are vulnerable. Infection rates are highest in winter and early spring due to crowding indoors and close contact with infected individuals. Although most cases are mild, it is important to know the risks to help protect our families and communities. This diagram by the CDC displays a graphical representation of Group A streptococcal infections from 2015 in the United States. Similar trends are present in recent years. These statistics taken show an increase in infection at the extremes of age, as well as an increased mortality rate in patients over 65 years of age.
As we move into our next part of our discussion of oral infections, I want to start by looking at gingivitis, one of the earliest and most common signs that harmful bacteria are disrupting the health of the mouth. One of the key organisms involved is Streptococcus mutans, a major bacterium found in dental plaque. S. mutans is best known for its role in cavity formation, but its impact extends further. What makes this organism particularly important from a public health standpoint is that it spreads easily through saliva exchange, meaning it can be passed between individuals through everyday contact. Now, gingivitis can have multiple causes, but S. mutans plays a significant role. It contributes to plaque buildup, produces acids that irritate gum tissue, and creates an environment where inflammation can take hold. These processes can set the stage for gum redness, swelling, and early tissue irritation, the hallmarks of gingivitis. S. mutans is also a central driver of dental decay. It metabolizes sugars into acids, and that acid gradually dissolves enamel. Over time, this makes cavities more likely to form. High levels of S. mutans are strongly associated with both increased cavity risk and gum inflammation, and importantly, both conditions can be influenced by bacterial transmission from one person to another. What this graphic illustrates is the scale of gum disease in the United States. The numbers are striking. According to national surveillance data analyzed by the American Academy of Periodontology, half of Americans adults suffer from some form of gum disease. That alone signals a major public health issue. Here, you can see that 42.7% of adults aged 30 and older have gum disease, which is a more advanced and destructive form of gum disease. When we translate that percentage into real population counts, it equals roughly into 64.7 million adults, a number large enough to rival some of the most common chronic diseases in the country. This graphic also breaks down disease severity. About 8.7% of adults have mild periodontitis, which often goes unnoticed, but it still indicates early tissue breakdown. As you can tell, gum disease is a major condition that public health experts want people to pay attention to.
Right, and it's one of the most widespread oral health issues we monitor, and it turns out to have a much bigger effect than just sore or bleeding gums.
Exactly. The epidemiologists explain that gum disease isn't just a small inflammation. People with it tend to have higher risk for a range of health problems, especially heart-related issues.
And that's a big part of the story. Research shows that gum disease is linked to a higher chance of cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and even strokes. It's a reminder that what's happening in your mouth can affect the entire rest of your body.
And those risks can be even greater for people who already have underlying conditions. For instance, individuals with both severe gum disease and type 2 diabetes face significantly higher health complications. It really shows how oral infections can stack on top of existing vulnerabilities.
And since this public service announcement focuses on oral transmission, it's important to mention the bacteria involved in gum disease can actually move beyond the mouth. If inhaled, it can contribute to respiratory illnesses such as pneumonia.
And researchers are also looking into possible connections with Alzheimer's disease, which just shows how far these bacteria may travel once they enter the body.
So the message here is simple. Gum disease isn't just a dental issue, it's a whole body issue. Paying attention to the risks of oral transmission can have a major impact on your life. Next up, we'll be talking about periodontal disease. Porphyromonas gingivalis is a key pathogen in the progression from simple gum inflammation to periodontal, also known as gum disease, which affects the deeper supporting structures of the teeth. Although it typically thrives in deeper gum pockets, it can be transmitted through saliva, especially in close contact behaviors such as saliva sharing. P. gingivalis produces enzymes and toxins that break down gum tissue. It disrupts the balance of the oral microbiome, enabling more harmful bacteria to flourish. It also triggers strong inflammatory responses, leading to gum recession, bone loss, and chronic infection. Because periodontal disease progresses slowly, people may not realize they've acquired harmful bacteria until significant damage has occurred. Now, talking about some of the statistics of the prevalence and burden of this disease. The statistics may be shocking. In the United States, among adults 30 years and older, around 42% have had some form of periodontitis. About 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women 30 years and older have had periodontitis, and about 60% of adults aged 65 and up have had it. A global review noted that in 2019, approximately 1.1 billion cases of severe periodontitis were reported, which has nearly doubled since 1990. This graph shows an age distribution of incidence and prevalence of periodontal disease. It can clearly be seen from the graph that as age rises, the prevalence and incidence of periodontal disease increases. Thank you for that, Robert, and welcome back, everyone. We will take a closer look tonight at this health issue that doesn't always make headlines, but affects far more people than we realize: periodontal disease.
Right, and the epidemiologist we spoke with explained that one of the major bacteria involved has a pretty big name:
Porphyromonas gingivalis.
Hard to pronounce, but important to understand.
Exactly. This bacterium can spread through saliva during close contact, and once it settles into the gums, it releases toxins that irritate and damage the tissue.
And what makes it tricky is how quietly it develops. That inflammation builds up over time, leading to gum recession, bone loss, and chronic infection, often before someone even knows why anything's wrong.
And it turns out this has a much more common effect than people think. Many adults have some level of gum disease, and the likelihood increases with age.
But what really stands out is the bigger picture. Experts say severe gum disease isn't just about your mouth. Research links it to issues like heart disease, metabolic conditions, neurological concerns, and even certain cancers.
So the takeaway here is that oral health connects directly to overall health. Understanding how these bacteria spread and catching problems early can make a big difference.
Definitely. More news coming up. Before we get further into today's story on oral health, we want to clear up a really common confusion. You'll hear the terms gum disease and periodontal disease used almost like they're the same thing, and honestly, most people mix them up.
Exactly. They're related, but they're not identical. Think of gum disease as a big umbrella term, which includes the early stage gingivitis, which is what most people mean when they say gum disease.
Gingivitis, or gum disease, is the mild reversible stage. That's when you see red, swollen gums or bleeding when you brush or floss. The good news is, with good oral hygiene and a professional cleaning, gingivitis can be completely reversed.
But if gingivitis isn't treated, it can progress to something more serious: periodontal disease, or periodontitis. That's when the inflammation goes deeper and it affects the bone and supporting tissues that hold your teeth in place.
Periodontitis brings more severe symptoms, like receding gums, deep pockets around the teeth, persistent bad breath, and even loose teeth. At that point, that damage can't be undone, but dentists can manage it and prevent it from getting worse.
So, the key takeaway, gingivitis, the first one we talked about, equals early and reversible. Periodontitis equals advanced and irreversible. They're connected, but they are not the same. And now you know the difference. And honestly, most people don't, so you're already ahead.
So, tonight's message is simple.
Saliva carries bacteria.
Social behaviors like kissing and sharing drinks spread those bacteria.
And the oral microbes you pick up today can impact your health tomorrow.
We're not here to tell you to stop having fun, just to understand the invisible passengers traveling from mouth to mouth.
Stay informed, stay healthy, and stay aware. See you next time.